Brighton have made it 4 wins out of 4 against Manchester United after that 3-1 victory. Goals from Danny Welbeck, Pascal Gross and João Pedro earning them that victory, which puts them up to 4th in the table. And Cass, I know that on the Times Game podcast, you predicted a 3-1 victory for Brighton. So it's no real surprise to you that they got this victory.
No, I was trying to make the point of, look, if we woke up Monday morning or Sunday morning after the game and Brighton had won 3-1, which I think they're capable of doing, would we be surprised? And all 3 people I was with said the same thing. No, we wouldn't be surprised if Brighton won, which that's no big deal. It shows you where Man United are. Game was... Look, Brighton made 6 changes. That's a lot, okay? That's a lot of changes. And I thought United were leggy. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, about jet lag and players, but Casemiro played with a parachute on his back. He couldn't get around at all. And I'm going to mention the Liverpool player in there as well a bit later. So Martinez was really poor. Lindelof was really poor. Casemiro was really poor. Apart from Højlund and Marcus Rashford, United didn't really offer anything. And I watched the Liverpool game yesterday and I watched the Man United game. Liverpool were awful yesterday. In the first half, they were terrible. Yeah. They were way worse than Man United were in the first half. Man United winning, 2-0 down, wasn't it, half time? Was it 2-0 down?
1-0.
1-0 down. 1-0. Liverpool went in 1-0 down, but could have been 2-0 quite comfortably at Molineux. And there was a lot more. United's first half performance wasn't bad if you're considering where they are, but by the end of the game, Brighton showed all their qualities and literally overrun Manchester United.
It's the worst start for Manchester United since the 2014-15 campaign under Louis van Gaal. 6 points from their opening 5 games. They've now conceded 10 in their last 4 as well, and have also conceded more than once in 4 successive league matches for the first time since 1979. And when you think about the 2 managers, Ten Hag and De Zerbi, Ten Hag's been in place longer than De Zerbi. Yet you feel like there is an identity. You feel as though there's a real, there's what I'm trying to say. There's a plan to Brighton. Whereas with Manchester United, you still feel this is a massive work in progress.
Yeah, well, okay. This is where we get it, right? There's 2 structures of the football club. So if we're talking about the effects at the very top happening to what happens on the field, Brighton's been in place for a number of years where we can quite clearly see the development of the way the football club has moved on and how they keep buying players, making money on them, moving them on. I mean, Danny Welbeck played for Man United years and years ago, and he's leading the line yesterday. Now, okay, normally Ferguson would be leading their line, but the manager made decisions on leaving 6 players out. The structure at Brighton is way better than Manchester United. It's mismatch everywhere at Old Trafford. Everything they do is wrong. How can you make so many mistakes, whether it's the players you buy, the mentality of the players you bring in, and then... the manager is... Look, Ten Hag's going through a very difficult phase. If they got rid of him, there'd still be a lot of the Man United players at the football club that are a problem. Yeah. So De Zerbi wouldn't have that problem. He rocks up at Brighton. He's walked into quite clearly a great dressing room, players that seemingly want to prove a point with talent and keep developing. The club keeps moving on. Man United go backwards. Brighton have been going forwards for years and years, and I just think you just see the 2 structures. That's the whole problem at Old Trafford.
It's interesting as well because when we were hearing the comms there with Ian Danter and Perry Groves, they highlighted that boos rang out from some section of the United support when Ten Hag decided to take off Rasmus Højlund. This is at a point where they're 2-0 down, they're chasing the game. United, for whatever reason, Ten Hag thinks, I'm going to take off Højlund, bring on Anthony Martial, and as Højlund is going off, there are boos. Ten Hag has sort of turn that into a positive, he says. Now, most people would look at boos as a negative, but he's looking at it as a positive because he says, you see the fans in the first moment in Old Trafford. The reception for Højlund was great. He performed very well. It's good they gave this signal, this message. It will give Rasmus belief, he says. I mean, it's an interesting way you can turn a negative into a positive like he's done there. But are we worrying in any way for Ten Hag that there is some sections of support that are turning, possibly, because there were boos at full time as well.
Well, if you're at a club like Man United and you lose enough games, you're going to get stick. There's been many a manager over many different decades where they've lost their job if things keep going wrong. I would have said the Man United fans booed more because they were bringing on Martial as well, knowing he's not the solution.
Right.
Because I think they've just about washed their hands with him as a player, and feel like, well, we need a goal. We need to get back in the game. The problem is he's had an injury. And, of course, the manager's protecting the player, thinking of the bigger picture, Champions League football coming, certainly Premier League games, and he's probably thinking, I'm not risking him with any shape or form.
Well, it's interesting you say that because he was obviously asked that. What were the boos aimed at Højlund going off? Were they aimed at Martial coming on? And he said it was because Højlund came off. So I don't want to discuss that because I don't know, he says. But with Anthony Martial last year, every time he played, he had a very positive effect on our games. He says, we almost lost no games with Anthony on the pitch. So when he is fit, he will definitely contribute. He said, at this moment, he is not top fit, he said. And yet you're bringing him on, and he's not top fit. It's a strange...
Yeah. He's got a lot of issues at the club. I mean, giving him a bit of the benefit of the doubt, the club is in turmoil in many shapes or form. So it's a tough gig for him. And I said to you, Nat, I mean, you've had this conversation. I've always been very suspicious of managers that come from Eredivisie, that have a certain way of playing, and it's the Ajax model that I'm not sure suited to the Premier League, where it's about possession from out the back and you overplay at the back, and sometimes the purpose of their style is not that effective. And I think, obviously Dutch football's really suffered in recent years. They're not the teams of years before because they lose all their best players. Ajax is a false level to me. Where they are. A false level. It's not that good. If you look at the teams they've had and how they performed in Europe, you have to go back quite a long way now with when the last team in Dutch football has done really well in the Champions League.
Well, they reached the semi-finals a few years ago, didn't they?
A few years ago.
Yeah. I know what you're saying.
I feel they lose too many players. That league has become a feeder league. So you're judging a manager from being a feeder league manager. Do you see what I mean?
I get
they sell all their players. So I find it a really tough one to understand how that's really going to pan out in the long run.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.